pond. People came from miles around to throw their trash down in to see how deep the hole was and listen for its end. Then one day, that fateful day, they forced Mel off his land. They paid him off and sent him off down under with a plan. They hid Mel's hole and covered it up so ne'er it could be found, so no one would ever know what's deep down in Mel's ground.
Night Dreams, Scary Story Night on Friday nights. Call in at 9:30 p.m. Pacific at 1-253-203-6695.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, here it is. It is now Wednesday down at the compound. I don't know what to say. You know, I was thinking this morning, the weather's starting to suck here. And then I got a message from one of my friends that lives in New Bern, North Carolina. And he told me that he got extra gas, extra food, extra ammo for all his guns, and he's sitting there and he's really concerned what is going to happen. Like maybe losing his house and everything else that could go on with that. I don't know. Boy, earth changes are happening so fast. People making fun of Al Gore all these years, saying that, boy, he, was crazy and didn't know what he was talking about. Well, you know what? Now we can sit back and he can laugh at us because I think he was so accurate of what is happening. And it's happening fast. Look at Antarctica right now. A major shipping company this spring is planning, instead of having to go around the Cape, they can just go right through Antarctica. A lot of earth changes. And tonight, we have a great person who's on our show lately, monthly, Mary Joyce, who runs the SkyShipOverCashiers.com. It's the reporting center basically for UFOs, Bigfoot, earth changes, and stuff like that. Hey, Mary, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing real well, thank you. I'm in the western part of North Carolina, so I'm not in the position that your friend in New Bern is. I'm very glad I'm not on the shore.
Yeah, I don't know. How bad do you think, are they talking how bad it could actually get?
They seem to, it's going to be bad, at least for some people. And because it's so wide, the rain's going to get us all, including those of us in the mountains. So even though I don't have flooding where I live, if we get tons of rain, trees can fall on power lines and we can lose power. But I'm not in a flood area.
Well, at least that part is. I hope you have a generator or something like that.
No, but it's not cold, so I'm not going to worry about it. We have plenty of water and food, and that's what it really takes.
Yeah, you can do a lot with a candle. I've been, one time even up here in Gig Harbor, Washington, we were without power for a whole week. And
that's a long time.
I know, and what was really bad is our power comes across the, the peninsula. It's a couple mile stretch over the bay, and then it comes over to where we are at, and they lost the cables. And, it was okay. At that time, I had a motor home, RV. So we, just went in there and lived, 8 people, crammed into, but at least we were warm because it was the middle of winter, and we could have, food till we ran out of propane.
Right. It's very seldom that it works to preach at people, but we have posted articles periodically that essentially are warning people about being on the coast. I know in one story we were talking about how at high tide the water will come up through the manholes in Miami, and so people will be wading in water at high tide even when there's not a storm. And then we've talked about entire islands off of Louisiana that no longer exist. In fact, I personally, one of the guys who does the television installations around here, he's originally from New Orleans, and his family owned quite a bit of land down there. It's now waist deep in water, so they have a deed to a land that is well beneath the water now. So we print stories like this occasionally just to remind people that, hey, this could really, really happen. And personally, I wouldn't build on the coast for anything at all.
I don't know. I had a scientist on a couple weeks ago, and he's claiming it's going to go the way it's going, it's going to be a lot faster than people realize. He said maybe 2 to 3 years. He said in about a year we're going to go past the tipping point where there's no return. And then he was talking about, the Atlantic Ocean and all that stuff. It's going to start cooling coming from the equator because of all, the water, fresh water from the Antarctica being dumped into the oceans. And his concern was what's going to happen like in Europe, UK and all that, France and all that stuff. They could go into a deep freeze like we never seen before. Because
it's the warm current that makes the big circle in the Atlantic that keeps things in balance. And if you don't have the heat, they're going to be real cold.
Yeah, I mean, to the point maybe they won't want to live there anymore. That's how cold it could get. The last ice age, Mary, we had up in Seattle was under thousands of feet of ice. But you go like 30 miles away and the temperature was back at the 60s and livable. I mean, it can really affect different areas. It don't have to be, hundreds of miles away.
That's true. So anyhow, anybody who's thinking about buying on the coastlines, I think they ought to think real, real hard.
Well, you know what? I'm glad I didn't retire in Florida because I got a funny feeling you might not have just beachfront property in Florida. You might not have any property at all eventually.
And we also are getting a whole lot more sinkholes down there. So it's sort of like living on a piece of melting Swiss cheese.
Yeah, and that's concerning too, the sinkholes, especially, a lot of it, not just because of EarthChanges, but, well, it is because, all these years we've been sucking, the blood out of the ground, oil. And then the scientists were smart enough, we'll just replace the oil we pump out with water. And what happens a few years later that the ground starts doing the sagging thing, splitting open, sinkholes start appearing. It's scary. I mean, boy, the scientists...
You do have to wonder about the intelligence of our species.
Well, and I don't know if I told you this before, but, I was talking on my show here last month. They were talking about Mars, ways they could jumpstart Mars. And they had a think tank of these scientists. One of them, or a group of them, said, well, we could, go and nuke the ice caps on Mars. That's going to melt the water. That's going to create, like, oceans and lakes and all that. Then there was another group of scientists that said, no, you can't do that. Don't you realize that the atmosphere is so thin it'll evaporate almost right away? So you melt it, it's gone. Then another group of scientists came back and said, guys, are you freaking crazy? Do you realize what'll happen if you nuke it? The water will be irradiated. Take your pick, Mary. Take your pick.
Those are not good choices.
No,
that shows you why you shouldn't instantly go along with somebody simply because they have a doctorate in a particular science, because they could be on the fringes of something and sound very credible, but you can't swallow it without checking into it from different directions, which is true of almost anything. We need to double-check things.
I know. Well, I know at my age I'm never going to go to Mars, so I don't have to worry about that. I do worry about one last thing, and then I'll let you go into your report and stuff for tonight.
Well, we're in no rush. I enjoy talking to you.
Well, Japan, their new idea is all these melted down reactors. They want to get rid of all that contamination, all that radiation. They want to dump it into the Pacific Ocean, and they're very close to doing it.
Oh, so there go all the fish. I think that's even a concern right now about the fish being exposed to that kind of things around Japan.
Well, that's...
And our Gulf, too. I mean, when we had the oil spill down there and, now the algae problem in the Gulf, I mean, that contaminates our food supply.
Oh, yeah, and it's scary. I mean, who wants to eat fish when you turn the lights off, it glows? I mean, that's what the scary part is. And another friend of mine, Ronald, lives in Florida, and he was talking about all this dead fish, because of the...
It's real bad this year because I think they've kind of backed off on some of the environmental protection steps that they had once initiated. I'm not an expert on this. But I think they've backed off, and now things are totally out of control.
Well, we basically don't have anybody really controlling our environmental anymore. I mean, somebody thought it would be better to save money and to get rid of it.
Right.
That's
Real
scary, too. Maybe they might get smart here over this next couple of days and realize that climate changes are real and not, made up.
Yes, I hope so too, really.
Well, I sure do. Now, what's going on out in the world? Anything new on Earth wobbles or our magnet field changing? Anything interesting?
Well, one of the things that we posted real recently, the title of it is Ancient Orientals Lived in the Grand Canyon. We have many of us have heard about that in bits and pieces for a long time. And I decided to get to the root of where all this information was coming from. And I've actually posted the entire article that caused all these stories to start. And it was originally printed in the Arizona Gazette in 1909. And it was a front-page story, and the Arizona Gazette was considered a respected newspaper at that time. And it wasn't very likely to publish a hoax on the front page. So that gives the story some credibility. And there were 4 other things that kind of made me think, well, this could be a legitimate story. The cavern network that was discovered back in 1909 has been off limits to the public ever since. And why is that? Why would they keep the public from there, when normally you can climb just about anywhere you want to? A third thing is that there are many things in that area that have been given Egyptian names, and there are things within the caverns that they discovered that appeared to be both Oriental and Egyptian. A fourth thing that supports the original story was that the Hopi Indians say their ancestors originated from the underworld of the Grand Canyon. And I've heard part of that before. I've heard about the Hopis talking about their ancestors coming from the underworld. I didn't know the underworld was the Grand Canyon. And that's another bit of support for this. And a fifth one is because the Smithsonian's been involved with it since the very beginning. I've become personally very suspicious of the Smithsonian. There's been a number of books that have come out in recent years where people have done quite a bit of research showing that giant skeletons had been found all over this country going back into the 1800s, and they were given to the Smithsonian, and then they just disappeared from sight like they never existed before. It seems that the Smithsonian kind of either hides or denies anything that doesn't fit the traditional American view of history. And the fact that the institution has done these kind of things in other areas makes me think they could very well be participating in the cover-up of this cavern system.
So what do you think, why they would, is it because they get government funding or they work with the government on stuff? Is that why you think maybe they kind of hush things up, especially about the giants and stuff? I mean, there's been so many reports through the years they'd find, skeletons and stuff like that. It goes to them and then, it goes.
They're gone.
Yeah, they're
and
history.
Even here where I am, I think you know that I did a book called Little People